am welcoming you all to the Energy Dialogues, e-dialogues for bettering human lives, perspectives on energy, climate, and poverty. Really excited today to have this conversation. It is going to be a great one. We have a number of amazing students here today, as well as a representative from Energy Terminal to have a really great Q&A with CEO of Liberty Energy's CEO, Chris Wright. And he is really absolutely open to any questions. So you will see there's a Q&A section. I know a lot of questions were already submitted. If there's going to be plenty of time to answer those and those that the students have. If you have a few others, feel free to put them in the Q&A section. But really, without further ado, I want to give as much time as possible to the conversation. So students, Chris, if you could turn your video on and join the conversation. I want to start with Chris. Please introduce yourself, share with everyone who you are and where you're representing, and let's get this started.
Look, I'm excited to be here with all of you. Thank you for being involved in energy and joining our call today. My name is Chris Wright. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. Born middle class, above average quantitative skills. I've had a dreamy, wonderful life, met an awesome gal at 18 years old who's my wife of forever, 2 great young children. I've got a lot to be lucky about. But I was a math science guy as a kid, and there was very concerns about energy when I was young. In fact, it was perceived as a crisis and world ending, not entirely dissimilar to today. And it drove me to go to MIT to work on fusion energy. I worked on solar energy after that in graduate school at UC Berkeley, worked on geothermal early on, but I also learned out early on I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to assemble great, passionate humans and see if I could do some different things. So I've started a few different companies, all in energy, mostly in oil and gas. In a blind squirrel finds nut, played a role in starting the shale revolution. And today I run a company called Liberty Energy. We're technology and horsepower. We frack nearly 20% of all the wells drilled in the US and Canada, but we also have investments in nuclear energy and geothermal energy. I don't care where energy comes from as long as it betters people's lives.
Lovely to hear you, Chris, today. Hello, everyone. My name is Benea. I'm originally from the Philippines, and I moved here to New York to study my master's in global affairs, and I'm concentrating on energy and environmental policy. So what drove me here from the other side of the world is basically my interest in bridging the gap between environmental sustainability and energy itself, because one form originates from the other. And I'll definitely be happy to participate in this conversation with y'all.
All right, thank you everyone, and thank you to Chris and Energy Dialogues for putting this together. My name is Evan Ward, originally from Michigan. Did my graduated in 2018, philosophy, politics, and the public program at Xavier University. Worked in state government for 4 years, primarily as a policy director for a member of the House. And then I've started last year, I'm in my second and final year of a master's degree in international relations at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, which has brought me here to DC and being able to connect with Energy Dialogues. And I had my first exposure to the energy sector with a summer internship last summer, and that really got me interested in the sector and its intersection with international relations and geostrategy. So very much looking forward to this conversation.
Hi everyone, I'm Victor Osajit. I'm a PhD student at Stanford University, and I'm originally from Nigeria. I'm an energy enthusiast, and I work in intersection of hydrogen, natural gas, and nuclear, but specifically really work on developing naturally occurring hydrogen, which is really a very new field in ways where we could naturally, create hydrogen, which is a very fascinating work I'm doing. My PhD here at Stanford. I've worked at Total Energies in Nigeria and also with Aramco Americas in kind of starting their hydrogen exploration target for the next decade in Western Saudi Arabia. I'm super excited to be here and I look forward to this discussion. And thanks so much to Chris and to Energy Dialogue for organizing this event.
Hi everyone, this is Sayed Talha Tirmizi, and I'm doing my master's. I'm in the final year of my master's in petroleum engineering at University of Texas at Austin, and my focus is on hydraulic fracturing and conventional resources as well as on geothermal energy. And I also run a Switch Energy Club at UT Austin as the president. And I'm very much interested, like in trying to hear what the youth thinks about the energy challenges and the perspectives, and trying my best to make the voices heard, creating platform for the youth. And I'm very excited to be here because this is one of the most important topics, I guess, concerning the challenges that we face in the world right now. And I'm very excited for the discussion today.
Hey everyone, Sam Wadlington. I'm a junior at Purdue University. Kind of been involved in lots of different things up at school, but finally got plugged in and connected at Energy Dialogues at North American Gas Forum a few months ago, which was a great event, and just honestly super excited to kind of be here today and discuss. My goal is a little bit different than I think some of the others here. I don't want to necessarily do policy or engineering. I'm getting my degree in combination of business and engineering, but I kind of want to do the energy finance side. So I'm going to go work at an investment bank this summer and hopefully, I guess, help finance the energy world of today, tomorrow, and forever. So yeah, thanks everyone, and looking forward to it.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Chris and Energy Dialogue for having us here. My name is Florence Yu. Like Evan, I go to Johns Hopkins SAIS, study international relations and energy and environment. So I'm an international student, come from China. And my connection with energy is that coming from a small town in China, a developing country, where I did not have constant electricity supply, additional to I personally suffered from asthma due to the cold. I had to move to the United States due to this issue. So I will say that I connect to energy and energy transition from a personal level, and myself has personally witnessed and benefited from the coal to gas movement in China. That's why it's so meaningful for me to join this conversation, talking about energy poverty, but also thinking about how do we help that for the rest of the world. So thank you again, and I'm looking forward to a conversation.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Wood. I'm the co-founder of Energy Terminal, which actually started as a podcast sponsored by Energy Dialogues nearly 2 years ago, and has since grown into a media community career platform that does all things around helping young people get involved in the energy industry. I kind of got my first bit of interest when I saw my grandparents' small town, which is smack dab in the middle of the Eagleford in South Texas, grow from about 5,000 people to 12,000 people pretty much overnight. And have since kind of dedicated my career to that, studied mechanical engineering with a focus in energy at Duke University. Oh, and I think I was pinned to start off with the first question, so I'll go ahead and do that. So I'm going to start with a high-level question, but I'm going to use the example of a gallon of gasoline. So most people typically, when you're driving around in your car, you only think about what's coming out of the tailpipe. But really the math behind it is about 2/3 of the emissions are associated with what's coming out of the tailpipe. About 1/3 is what it took to actually produce that gallon of gasoline. So there's all this focus on the 2/3, almost no focus on the 1/3. So Chris, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about some of the ways companies are looking to reduce emissions within the oil field.
Yeah, great question. Because of course there's so many steps along that way. So I am also the chairman of an E&P company. So we drill oil and gas wells in North Dakota's Bakken and we produce it. And then we've got to transport that to market. So yeah, a good amount of these secondary emissions or production emissions come from just energy used in drilling and fracturing when you don't have infrastructure in place, natural gas gets both flared and inadvertently, but almost inevitably vented at some level. This creates emissions. Then there's the transportation for oil to refineries, which is an energy intensive business in its own right. So there's lots of sources of emissions along the way. So on the E&P side, producing oil and gas wells, the low hanging fruit is just replacing pneumatic valves. When you hear that, psh, psh, when you're changing a valve, people generally use the energy of the pressurized fluid stream in that thing to switch a valve. Well, if that fluid is methane, you're venting a little bit of methane to the atmosphere every time you do that. So those valves are rapidly, but far from done, being transitioned in our industry. First, it was all to electric, but that's troubling. Electricity grids are not 100% reliable. They go down. So I'd say more common today is just to use air, to load pressurized air to operate pneumatic valves. Also, it's just getting permits and ability to build infrastructure. So when you first bring a well on production, it's already got all the infrastructure it needs to take everything to market. In Colorado, where our head office is, it's illegal to flare. You can't bring a well on until all that infrastructure to capture everything is on. We also do a thing called green completions, which is, again, just to capture fugitive emissions during the fracturing of a well, and most importantly, when you drill out the plugs and first bring it on production. That's the biggest source of emissions. But of course, technology and ingenuity, that can be addressed. On the Liberty Energy frac company side, the biggest thing we're doing is moving all our horsepower. Like diesel engines are basically the main workhorse of the world. Very large scale, it's turbines. Everything in mid-scale is diesel engines. So we're converting our 3 million horsepower frac fleet from diesel burning to natural gas burning. That's a meaningful reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. It's a meaningful cost reduction. And maybe most importantly, it's a meaningful reduction in pollutants, not just greenhouse gas emissions, but just natural gas combusts cleaner than gasoline or diesel or any longer hydrocarbon chain. So a lot to be done there, Michael, as you said. But I would say progress is going along at a good clip. Past safety and efficiency and cost of operations, reducing emissions and cleaning up production practice is the top focus of our industry these days. Who's next?
I think we're just being organic, and thank you so much for your answer. And going on top of the using gas to reduce emission, I have a question regarding how we started, which is from the shale revolution. So I have been wondering that since the shale revolution has enabled the US to experience the manufacturing renaissance, so we were able to bring the manufacturing back and have this competitive edge due to this cheap gas. And right now, as the US is refocusing on developing more domestic manufacturing infrastructure, and all of that is going to building renewable energy, of course, but do you expect natural gas field to power this process? Because how do we build a power plant? To my understanding, still using gas, but will you we will see a boost demand for natural gas because of the increasing infrastructure, or we'll see the alternative to power this process? Thank you.
So great question, Florence. I've been speaking on the shale revolution for maybe about 15 years. And one of the points I always highlight is it could lead to the reindustrialization of the United States. To me, that's important, not just economically, but my passion outside of my work and my family is poverty. I was born middle class. I was born in the United States. Like, as they said, I've had everything lucky going for me. But I see people on my own streets where I live and in the 55 countries I travel that weren't so lucky. So by far, my biggest motivator is reducing poverty. And in the United States, just sort of the bottom quartile, they tend to work in energy intensive jobs. Blue collar jobs are energy intensive jobs. And when you make energy more expensive, like California, which I lived in for 19 years, you end up just exporting those jobs. California, a state with everything going for it, had these sort of top-down policies on energy, nominally in the name of climate change, but I think no meaningful progress there. But they did make electricity more expensive, and they did chill investment in the state. California now has the highest adjusted poverty rate in the nation, the highest rate of deindustrialization, Nobody makes energy intensive things in California anymore. So the blue collar people that worked at those facilities, they don't have jobs anymore, and they're just made somewhere else where energy's cheaper. And of course, that's a lot. Europe is doing the same thing. If you make energy more expensive and less reliable in your locale, the simple math says, wow, look at the decarbonization progress we've made. A lot of that progress isn't real. You've just moved it from here to another locale with cheaper energy, typically with a dirtier, higher carbon mix of energy. And so regarding natural gas, so I write this report called Bettering Human Lives, and I'm just finishing the latest version that'll come out in January. And one of the things I write about is the energy addition. In 2010, the world consumed 500 exajoules of energy. But again, we've got 2.5, 3 billion people in dire energy poverty. Well, so over the last 12 years, we've gone from 500 exajoules of consumption to 600 exajoules. That is an amazing rise in standard of livings, people coming out of poverty, rising up the economic ladder. Where did that 100 exajoules of power come from? I find the term energy transition sort of nonsensical because we're not transitioning away from anything, but we are adding some things on top. But that 100 extra exajoules over the last 12 years, the biggest source of that energy by far and away was natural gas. 40% of that additional energy came from natural gas. Natural gas is by far and away the fastest growing energy source in the world. You'll probably be surprised to hear the second fastest growing source of energy over that last 12-year period is coal. 25% of that incremental energy came from growth in coal. 20% of that incremental growth came from oil. 85% of the additional energy, not the total energy, just that additional, came from hydrocarbons. 6% came from wind, 5% came from solar, 4% came from hydro, and deeply, unfortunately, 0 from nuclear. Roughly as much capacity retirement as capacity addition. So look, natural gas is by far the fastest growing source of energy in the world. That I think is quite likely to continue, and at least for the next decade or two. But remember, coal is rapidly growing, and people in the oil and gas industry or people concerned about the environment and climate like all of us are supposed to badmouth coal. I don't do that. Coal is by far and away the world's largest source of electricity. It has been for over 50 years, and it will be for the foreseeable future. For people in lower income nations that don't have domestic natural gas production, coal is just simply the cheapest, most reliable way to bring electricity. With nearly 1 billion people with no access to electricity and another billion with only a few hours a day of low wattage electricity, that's way better than nothing. You can charge a cell phone and have some light in the evening, which is awesome for education, but not enough energy to raise your income or better your lot in life. Like, to me, by far and away, the biggest challenge we face today is better energizing the whole world, particularly those in the bottom third.
Chris, can I jump in and ask a question real quick, kind of relating to coal, but like tangentially about developing nations? Okay, perfect. So yeah, I think, one area that we can definitely see this, dilemma right now is India, right? Like India, most are expecting them to kind of hit their industrial revolution that China hit 25 years ago right now. And then China also, like, I think the statistic is that they're opening about like a coal plant a week, I think, for like the next 5-ish years. So, is there a level to which like the US can help, streamline like natural gas or things like that into those countries, like a power source with higher power density, that will like power more homes and also be like more efficient and cleaner?
Absolutely. So look, the surge in US gas production lowered global natural gas prices and has enabled this growth. That's a very positive thing. But look, we've had political opposition in this country to building new pipelines, slow dragging permitting approval of LNG. So we had a very unfortunate event about 2 years ago where global demand for liquefied natural gas exceeded the total dispatchable supply. So when demand exceeds all available supply, you get a very rapid price response. LNG prices tripled, quadrupled in a month. So what happened during that time? Fertilizer plant production got shut down, which is what's led to rising grain prices we're seeing now. This was also a few months before Russia invaded Ukraine. I think it's not a coincidence. When natural gas prices were very high, this was Russia's maximum leverage time. They've wanted to invade Ukraine since Putin came to power 23 years ago. They've been in Ukraine for a decade, almost a decade now. So that was a catalyst that enabled Russia to move ahead. It also made India and Pakistan rethink their plans. They were all in natural gas, building pipelines, infrastructure, and all that. But hey, they don't have enough domestic production, so they have to import LNG, and they saw a major energy commodity go up 3- or 4-fold in price. I think it got them very worried about banking too much on natural gas, and that swung their pendulum back to coal. Coal's still going to be the dominant investment avenue. Natural gas is going to be number 2. For cleaner industrial fuel, for home heating, for electricity, maybe in urban areas we'll use natural gas. But hey, we can't. I think they dialed back their investment in the infrastructure to move natural gas a little bit because of that price spike. To me, that price spike never should have happened. But by opposing natural gas infrastructure in this country, people think it's green or climate friendly or whatever to stand in the way of this stuff. I think it's positively destructive. And we had huge ripple effects around the world. We're back on track now of rapidly building, expanding natural gas. But for China or Vietnam or India to import LNG from across an ocean, it's still going to be wildly more expensive than coal. It's going to be cleaner. It's going to be higher quality energy. It's going to make air quality better, but everything involves trade-offs. Low-income nations are going to choose coal over imported natural gas for a long time to come. I'm big in getting natural gas production in more countries. If you can produce natural gas locally and you don't have to pay to chill it down very cold, to liquefy it, and then regasify it and transport it, if you can build it locally, you can have low price natural gas too.
I would
Chris,
largely agree. Sorry, real quick. On the same train, jumping on what Sam was telling about comparison between how the U.S. is focusing on exporting their natural gas resources, and how the emerging markets and emerging and developing countries are also trying to ramp up and meet the demands of lowering their emissions. However, given the expensive energy price associated with the renewable assets that are now being implemented, emerging and developing countries are mostly attached to depending on coal and natural gas, especially in Asia, to be specific. On that regard, Chris, do you think the U.S. would be able to teach U.S. or Europe would be able to teach emerging and developing countries on how to leapfrog so that we don't have to meet the peak emissions further than 2025?
Yeah, so great question. As you heard early in my career, I worked in solar. I'm again working in geothermal. Unfortunately, most of what Europe and the United States has to teach so far is what not to do. Germany maybe went the most aggressively this direction. Germany over the last 20 years has spent somewhere between $500 billion and $1 trillion. That's an economy, a seventh or an eighth the size of the US economy. Just an absolute gobsmacking investment for their energy transition, their Energiewende. Germany's gone from 80% of their primary energy from hydrocarbons to 74%. That's it. 6 percentage point decline, 5-fold increase in their electricity price, massive energy poverty problems, rising political populism now. Industry has to be subsidized at a massive level to stay competitive. Germany, a longtime manufacturing powerhouse. So I think we've shown pretty clearly, if you invest massively through subsidies and mandates in low energy density, intermittent sources of energy, you're going to make energy more expensive. And most of your energy, your believed energy reductions, emissions reductions, are really just exporting. Stuff that was built at a natural gas powered plant in Germany is now built at a coal powered plant in Vietnam or China. That's a doubling of the manufacturing intensive emissions of that, but it doesn't get counted that way. It's no longer on German shores. They count it as a reduction. And also, of course, when you make electricity 4 or 5 times more expensive, people will consume less of it. So yes, you'll lower your emissions, but you're lowering your emissions at the opportunity cost and human health cost of your citizens. Last data point on that, Europe last winter, fortunately a mild winter, not a very cold winter, but their home heating prices got so escalated by that rise in natural gas. Europe used to be a big natural gas producer. It's declined a lot, so they're very dependent on imports, which sets their marginal price. 68,000 excess deaths in the European Union last winter from the winter before. So a warmer winter, but that higher energy cost, it really impacts low-income people. And of course, Europe is continuing its deindustrialization program, which just means industries leaving their shores and going to going places that have cheaper, lower cost energy. So I think climate change is a global phenomenon. These targets by nation or in the United States by state, they're just nonsensical. It's easy to move emissions out of your state. It's much harder to lower global emissions without impoverishing the globe. The answer, of course, is technology. People are not going to voluntarily transition to more expensive, less reliable energy. It's just, wealthy countries have mandated it, but that's not going to be adopted in the developing world, nor should it be adopted in the developing world. What we need to show is how we can bring lower cost, affordable, reliable energy that's lower emissions and cleaner. And the only two levers we really have today there, by far the biggest lever today is natural gas, but it's got its limits. Everything has its limits. I think nuclear has enormous potential. I'm a massive nuclear champion. And nuclear, sadly, went from 6.5% of global primary energy 20 years ago to only 4% today. It's actually declining in its market share, not so much in its output, but in its market share, because it's not growing with growing energy demand. We need that to happen. We need to show the way with effective permitting and get small modular reactors out there. We need to help the world re-embrace nuclear energy, re-embrace energy sobriety, and not sort of politically driven, feels good, sounds good energy. We need, if we do it in a way that betters people's lives, people will adopt that. But what we've done mostly for energy policy so far in the US and Europe, no one outside of the wealthy nations will adopt any of that.
Chris, I really like the fact that you sort of shed light on the fact that the climate change problem is really a close-sum problem. I think the way most people are looking at it is that, hey, if I get emissions out of my backyard, right, I'm kind of good, right? I'm helping to, California, it's a very good example of this, as you highlighted earlier. But if you reducing emission at a particular area in the world, and you are increasing emission in another side of the world, where we all share the problem, right? So I really like the fact that you actually shed light on that. One thing I also like is that you talked a little bit about, we talked a lot about the problems, right? The different problems with energy. And I think I picked on the solution of natural gas being the solution, pretty much, because you're going from high energy, high carbon dense fuels to like C1, right? Which is very good. As developing countries industrialize, they need a lot of energy to actually industrialize. First world countries, United States has really enjoyed the oil boom and kind of run away with it, with high emissions and industrialization. But now, so many developing countries are now being faced with a dilemma of, you want to industrialize, but the first world countries are telling you to also reduce your carbon emission, at the same time. So what do you think? How do you think the United States can really help, in that front, especially with the export of capital? Because one solution that you talked about that I think is not well spoken about is the fact that you have to develop like natural gas production in those countries, which is very good because you don't have to ship, through the ocean and stuff like that. LNG, which is, the cost of, doing all these processes gets more expensive. So by having this sort of like local continental or like natural gas production facilities in these countries, you sort of reduce the emission and also reduce the cost of energy. So how can the United States help with export of capital, to these countries. Because, for example, in COP28 right now, they're talking so much about, green and investing a lot of capital in green solutions, but no one is talking about this practical solution. So if the attention of the world is really focusing on greenifying, there is no investment that is going towards the alternative, which is so much more practical. So I wanted you to talk about that.
Oh, exactly. Look, I've always been outspoken about energy, and frankly, I've been embarrassed. And I confronted one of the lead guys behind this effort, embarrassed by the messaging from wealthy countries to developed nations in the advice. In fact, at COP26 in Glasgow, 20 nations, including the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, the wealthy nations of the world, all together pledged that they would stop state funding for hydrocarbon development in the developing world. To me, it's just immoral and outrageous. As I mentioned, look, the United States has not declined the percent of our energy that comes from a hydrocarbon over the last 2 or 3 decades. And we will not meaningfully do it in the next 2 decades either. We might go from 82% to 79 or 78%, but we simply don't have replacements for the majority of the uses of hydrocarbons. I'm all for the energy technologies, all for incremental progress. But to talk about Africa, Africa's 1.3 billion people, nearly 1 billion people cook their daily meals burning wood, dung, and agricultural waste, solid biomass, charcoal. And the ones that are getting in the high end of that are burning charcoal. Inside, this kills globally somewhere between 2.5 and 3 million people per year, every year. Nearly the death rate from COVID globally over the last 3.5 years. We shut down the world because deaths from COVID were wealthy, meaning elderly people in rich countries. This is generally poor people in poor countries, but also low-income people in our own country are dying from this same thing of indoor air pollution. So to me, it's all about prioritizations. By far and away, number one, 2.5 billion people need a way to not have this excess, and it's mostly children and women who are getting cardiovascular diseases, heart disease, and dying young. They're also spending over an hour a day gathering fuel wood. It's dangerous, it's disempowering, and it's unhealthy. The answer to that is very simple: a propane cook stove. It costs $1 a day to completely change the living conditions of people. Well, my company, we have started the Bettering Human Life Foundation to support entrepreneurs in Africa through working capital, through technology, through everything we can to help spread that faster. Now, about 100 million people per year are making the jump from solid biomass to clean cooking fuels, dominantly propane. It's just the cheapest, most reliable option. I don't care what the option is, but that one today is by far the easiest. We need to accelerate that. That is job number one. People aren't going to worry about, the world going to be a few tenths of a degree warmer 50 years from now if they don't know where their next meal is coming from, their family's unhealthy, they don't have basic education. Like, look, there's a pyramid of needs. You've got to get out of poverty first. If you look at look, I'm a mountain climber. I travel around the world in adventure. It's the rich, highly energized countries that have been getting cleaner my entire lifetime. We got wealthy enough, we can worry about these luxuries, and we should worry about those luxuries. But low-income people and low-income nations, that's just way down their list. We should not be imposing our priorities or our values on them, particularly since we don't have viable solutions to offer. So yes, I am all for locally. Now, coal is always first. 70% of the people that get their first access to electricity get it from hydro and coal. And so we can't demonize these sources. These are how people get electricity. Natural gas, you got to build a pipeline infrastructure. That takes time. That takes some wealth. The majority of the people that don't have electricity today that are going to get it in the next 10 or 15 years, they're going to get it from coal. And while coal may not be our favorite energy source, it's way better than wood and dung. I celebrate the arrival of electricity there. And Victor, in your country, Nigeria produces more than twice as much natural gas as Nigeria consumes. So Nigeria is in a unique position. They have a lot of natural gas production. They don't yet have the infrastructure to move it around the country much, but Nigeria is in a position where it could move that way. It could clean up its fuel source with locally produced energy source. Lots of Africa has oil and gas, and of course, coal reserves too. A lot of Africa has geothermal resources. Kenya gets a fair amount of electricity from geothermal. And with this next generation geothermal technology, we own part of a company called Fervo. Very exciting stuff is coming from them. So we need locally produced, affordable, reliable energy in low-income nations. To me, that is job number one by far. Number two is don't degrade the quality and cost of our energy system, as Europe has done, particularly Germany and the United Kingdom and Denmark. California has done here. New York, my own state, Colorado, is trying to make energy more expensive and less reliable here, which just means low-income jobs are going to move out. That's not a winning strategy. We need technology improvement. We need sensible policy. A policy only makes sense if the cost of implementing it is smaller than the potential benefits received. We're passing a lot of policies where it costs $1 and we might get a nickel or a dime of benefit. That's not a good policy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I really enjoy the conversation, especially the way Chris, you're using facts and figures to support the discussion. I think this is really important. And when talking about climate change, carbon emissions, and everything, so my question is why the general perspective or mainly the opinion is focused on energy industry. Looking at the industry, the way they have the share of carbon emissions every day, year, according to the percentages, the energy industry produces around 30% of the carbon emissions, while transportation industry produces around 14 to 16% of the carbon emissions. Does it mean we stop using cars, we stop using jets or airplanes? And even agriculture industry also produces carbon emissions up to 18 to 24%. Does it mean we stop eating food? No. We have to think about the problem. We have to think about the solution for it, and the way the energy challenge is. I think it's a lot of interconnected, and especially because when we talk about energy challenges, we're talking about, let's say, reliability, affordability, economy, and all those things. But I have one more factor to add to this is about how the perspective of the youth is changing, because especially they're according to one poll by Amnesty, around 40%, 41% of the young people think climate change is a global emergency, and the way this opinion is transforming is because these young people are born in an era of rapid technological advancement. Every year we have a new iPhone, we have new gadgets, and the way the technology is moving, so the youth really wants a sudden change. They want to see the change abruptly, in a year or so, but that's totally not possible, because we are, even if we talk about renewables, the way they're growing, we are in a transition period. But still during this time, they're around 40% of the population in sub-Saharan region are still living without electricity. There are 789 million people living without electricity in 21st century. Imagine living without a light bulb, or even for us, living without an Wi-Fi for an hour is something we cannot even think about. So there are people who have lived their life without electricity, which is, I think, a very basic human right in this century. And talking about just climate change, oil and gas industry has a market value of up to around $6 million. And just in US alone, it provides 10.3 million jobs. So how do you think how the social, cognitive, as well as the algorithmic bias being added into the opinion of should we move away from oil and gas, or about this whole climate change and thing? How do you think about the way the young people are thinking on this matter? Do you think they are having bias added in their opinion? If so, how we can overcome this huge challenge? Because 3/4 of the young people, which are between the age of 18 to 34, just in US, believe that shifting away from fossil fuel is a solution to climate change, which is not true. considering all the facts and figures and like the things we discuss in the conversation and the reality.
So Syed, first of all, nice to see you again. It's been a year and a half or something like that since I've seen you. And I appreciate your framing of that question. Like, how did we get here? And as I travel around the world, it's funny, you know, wealthy people in the wealthy nations are very climate focused and very climate assessed. But, you know, as they say, it's sort of a subset of what I call the lucky 1 billion that have sort of fully energized lives and a different range of opportunities than the other 7 billion. And look, I think it's for two reasons. Part of it is young people. I mean, I was young once too, you know, are idealistic and they want to make the world a better place. And look, if the planet's at threat and humanity might end, by God, what's more important than dedicating your life to solving this challenge? So I get the, you know, kids want to do something that's meaningful. To me, that's a huge part of our business, our company. Why are we better than all our competitors? Because we've got better people and a better culture. Because we treat our company as a mission. We're out to make the world a better place, which means we acknowledge the negative things we do and the positive. We try to make the positives bigger and the negatives smaller. We're open and we're passionate. Now, you mentioned a lot of people believe, yes, we can, you know, wind and solar are cheaper, so we should just get rid of oil and gas and build more wind and solar mills. That's widely believed. And heck, why wouldn't that be believed? Heck, we've got, you know, Mark Jacobson at Stanford constantly writing papers about how the whole world could run on wind and solar. But this is sort of silly spreadsheet energy math. A few quick things on that. One is electricity delivers about 20% of global energy. 20%. The other 80% do not come from the electrical grid. Wind and solar is like theoretical top is 20%. You really can't get above 50, and I would argue above 40% grid penetration before the cost of stabilizing the grid is just ruinous. And even getting to 30 or 40% penetration, as we've seen, causes a massive increase in electricity price. Like the wind and solar are unlikely ever to become double-digit percent of global energy ever, independent of policy. So the biggest use of energy by far is to make stuff. It's thermal, high-temperature process heat. We use as much energy just making steel, cement, plastics, and fertilizer, these four most critical substances that undergird the modern world. We use as much energy just to produce those four materials as delivered by the entire global electricity sector. So you've got to look at energy in this broader thing. Where are we going to get that process heat? All comes all today from hydrocarbons. In low-income nations, it's from burning wood and charcoal to forge metals or whatever. Nuclear is the thing that can provide not just electricity, but also process heat. So number one, it's sobriety. I could say, heck, an answer to your question, Syed, is energy dialogues. We've got to get people just a little bit more engaged about climate change is real, it's global, it's a serious thing, all that's true, but it needs to be viewed in a reasonable context of, you know, if we spend $100, you know, to divert climate damages and we save $2 of climate damages, well, we've just impoverished the world by $98. That's not the best investment. We need better technologies, better things, so that when we invest $1, we're going to get many dollars of benefits from that. And almost all the climate change investment is the opposite. We invest $1 and we rarely get a dime of benefits. And you mentioned Silicon Valley and it's iPhones. I remember 20 years ago, everyone in Silicon Valley thought we're going to take over energy. You know, Google had their renewable energy is going to be cheaper than coal, and the smart guys are really going to go after energy. Because look, I started in semiconductor device manufacturing, you know, that Moore's law, right? We just incredible progress in computation and communications. And it's because information is not physical. You can just keep representing it effectively by smaller and smaller molecules. You can shrink it all the way down to the quantum level. Energy doesn't work that way. It's real mass, real friction. Energy takes land, materials, and you can miniaturize it by going to better energy technologies. We went from wood to a much higher energy density source of coal, to a higher energy density source of oil, to a higher energy density source of natural gas, to a higher energy density source of nuclear. So we've been running up this energy density thing, making the world a better place. And now all the movement is to go backwards. Wind and solar, 100 times more land, 10 times more material for a way lower value source of energy. Because when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, the incubators still have to keep the kids alive. The hospital's still got to run. The lights got to stay on in the school. So when you reverse energy density, you go against physics, like that's just not going to go well. But there's a mass advertising campaign that it is going to go well. We're deceiving the population, and we're starting to see the backlash of that. Look at Europe. Look at the ugly political backlash that started in Europe, and I think will get much worse in the next 10 or 20 years. We risk that in the US as well. We need an honest dialogue about climate change, an honest dialogue about energy, and an honest, like I spoke recently in Utah to 400 climate activists, college students and recent graduates. At the end of that, I had people lined up to say, wow, I got to focus my efforts differently. How do I get into this clean cooking fuels, energy access thing? Like, kids are passionate. If they understand the issues better, that great energy and passion, I think, can be more productively redirected. I got to shut up. Keep going with the questions.
So, Chris, I'm wondering about what I've been through the conversation. I've been thinking about Africa, as we mentioned, and then also Europe as well. I'll go the Europe route. Do you think that France then has been getting things right and could be a blueprint for the rest of the European countries with their embrace of nuclear? Italy is starting to do the same thing, or will they require more natural gas production on the continent? Pipelines maybe from elsewhere. Geopolitically, that's getting pretty sticky with Azerbaijan and Russia, of course. Maybe from North Africa could be a possibility. What do you see the path for European energy independence and affordable energy in Europe? What do you see that path being?
Yeah, so yeah, Europe, I think, well, and not all of Europe, but so many of the leading countries in Europe have gone so far and so deep the wrong direction that it's politically hard to backpedal, but they are going to. I mean, Germany, after 20 years of saying we're not going to build LNG import terminals, we can get it all cheaper by pipeline from Russia. You know, that wasn't a good bet. Now they've rapidly built these sort of floating LNG import terminals. Italy's doing the same thing. France, I think, certainly was absolutely right to be an early mover in nuclear. It's been, 70 to 80% of their electricity. But again, people always confuse. Electricity is not energy. It's one form of energy. So France still dominantly runs on hydrocarbons, as virtually every nation on the planet does. But their electricity sector is dominantly run on nuclear. And they haven't had the price explosions that Germany has. Yes, on a relative scale, they've done some good things. Now, politically, they're driven to build wind and solar in France now, too. So, they're going to start moving their electricity prices up, and you're going to get a political interest group that's going to count on those subsidies. And that once you have top-down decision-making, you tend to get stuck in things. In a competitive marketplace, something's winning, and then, we were imposing complex fluorescent light bulbs on everyone. We made everyone buy them and tool them. And then LEDs came along and just crushed them. Achieving the end we wanted, more efficiency from energy conversion to light. But marketplaces are better than doing that. When government's picking winners and losers, things are not going to go well.
Yeah, I'll jump in next. Quick comment before my question. I am super glad to hear you talk a little bit about the talent and the human part of this. That is our bread and butter at Energy Terminal. We want to build the next generation of energy leaders who are going to solve the problems of the energy industry today. If you're a young person who wants to make a financial impact on the world, a social impact on the world, a climate impact on the world, the energy industry is the place to do it. No question. Then the question is on a current event. So tomorrow, world leaders and companies all across the world are going to be flying into Dubai and starting COP28, huge gathering of climate and energy people all over the world, expecting some major commitments and conversations on how countries and organizations are going to approach their energy and decarbonization strategies. Chris, we've talked a lot about a bunch of different global commitments and policy ideas. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on some of the things that you're hoping to see world leaders talking about at COP28.
Yeah, look, I think we're going to see a louder voice from the developing countries. I think were more passive early on. Yeah, frankly, there was a political agenda, and in Denmark, there was a promise of $100 billion a year annual transfers from the wealthy nations to the developing world. This got the attention of all the developing world to go to COP and sort of toe the line. But now that aid, of course, has not been forthcoming, and the preaching about we're not going to help Bangladesh, build a new natural gas power plant, or we're going to chastise them for even doing it. I think that pushback of this sort of energy hypocrisy is growing. I think this is a good thing. I think we're seeing more outspoken people from South Asia and from Africa, and that needs to happen. Climate change is a real physical phenomenon that deserves a thoughtful investments in technologies and trade-offs, but it has become a religion. If you're not an alarmist, you're a denier. Just look at the language of it. This isn't the sober language of real issues. And it has led to a lot of energy, passion in the energy space that's just very religious fervor, but not educated. When I look at the people on this call right now and these awesome questioners, you're the solution to the future. Is smart, thoughtful people that care about the environment, that understand climate change, that understand energy access, understand the interplay of these with lives. Like, there is an absolute hunger for that. People say to me, "Oh, Chris, you go to universities, they'll stone you." I go speak at a university. I did get a Extinction Rebellion did throw a funeral for Mother Earth upon my arrival. At the end, I have a line of people asking about internships and asking to understand more about the company. If you're honest and thoughtful about energy, there's an incredible hunger. There is a craving for that. I was invited, I was the keynote speaker at TIACREF, which is a $1 trillion investment fund that runs teacher investment funds. They have been very active in divestment from fossil fuels and decarbonization, investing in energy transition. I was shocked. I didn't even know the people that invited me, but they invited me to speak, which I was thrilled. I gave the same just honest, here's the facts, which is, certainly there was an energy transition panel right before me that said almost polar opposite of what I said. But at the end, incredibly positive reception. I was told by far and away the most liked talk. We need more of this. Like, just because people say X, Y, and Z, it doesn't mean they're forever wedded to that. They just think that's the best path. We all should pursue the best path. But you people that are taking time to learn more about energy, more of the subtleties, more of the trade-offs, that skill is going to be very valuable in the coming decades. Look, energy is not a sector of the economy. It is the sector of the economy that enables everything else. If the energy system breaks down, no other problem matters. It is the only problem that matters. So I think you've all chosen the right field to go in, and also to look at energy more broadly, not just energy production, but how does it fit into society? What are its environmental impacts? How does it compare to these other decisions we can make? Look, the right energy system is going to be different in different countries, in different stages of their development at different times. Like, natural gas isn't the right answer for everything. All it isn't the solution. It's just right now it has the best set of advantage, and it's being embraced the most widely. Nuclear is not today, but it could be. Geothermal could grow in that. But let's also just be realistic. Coal and oil are not going away for generations. We don't know how to make hydrocarbons, fertilizers, steel, cement without them. We're not going to give up the modern world because it's politically unpopular. So let's talk about future and trade-offs and all that, but you all need to be the sober people that know the facts. Everyone's still going to have a different conclusion. The facts don't say the path forward. They just need to inform this discussion about trade-offs for the path forward.
All right, Chris, I'm just going to keep this very short because of our time, but I like the fact that you mentioned that there's no one size fit all. And really, if we're gonna take a step back, right, and kind of see energy as a whole, we also have to appreciate the fact that there's so much development that is going in renewable energies. And for different countries, the different solutions, I think that's what we should really sort of optimize for. Or where do you have a advantage, like better than any other place to generate or create a particular source of energy? I think, as you rightly said at the beginning, you don't care where the energy comes from as long as it keeps the light bulb on. So really, that's the best source of energy, right? So that I just wanted to drop that in. For example, you cannot build like solar panels or like wind farm in an area like New York City that demands a lot of energy, and stuff like that. So it's different, solutions for different areas. So we also have to also give appreciation to new sorts of energies and technological advancements in those areas as well.
Yeah, I'm all for heavy government investment in fundamental energy research. How do we get breakthroughs? How do we make things better? I'm not for subsidizing stuff that doesn't have a lot of room for improvement. And now it's just an industrial policy. That's not helpful. But investment in energy innovation, science, understanding, I'm all for that. But I totally agree with your words, Victor. Well said.
And I have a last question, which is we talk about a lot of technology, and you say that will be the key to the future. And as a policy student, which we might or might not be the pain in your company or creating regulation in the future, I want to ask you that as an engineer and a business practitioner, have you seen any gap between what the government and the scholars has proposed and the situational reality? Like, for example, what like the political expectation versus the reality regarding like the feasibility of using existing pipeline to transport hydrogen. So is there any gap, and are they feasible? Thank you.
Oh, Florence, is there any gap? It's almost all gap. Almost everything said by politicians in my own state of Colorado, we're going to be 100% renewable energy in 2045. No, we're not. First of all, it's not energy. It's just electricity they're talking about. It's not going to happen. But the pursuit towards it is just going to make electricity more expensive till it's so politically unpalatable in Colorado, then we'll probably stop. But yeah, politicians, they only think to the next election. Stuff that's going to be a train wreck. It's easy to promise anything in 2050 because it'll all be gone. They want to say what sounds good and feels good to people, not what's actually good policy. I talk to a lot of politicians. They know this. A lot of them know that their public pronouncements are nonsense. And in fact, their justification to me is, well, that's the aspiration. That's what people want to hear, Chris. We just got to promote that. And I'm like, you're a leader. You're setting a viewer perspective. I think it's incumbent upon you to be more thoughtful in your speech and in your dialogue about where we're going. And again, but that gap is not being filled by the politicians. It's going to be filled by the people I'm looking at that are students right now and that are a little bit bolder and a little bit more knowledgeable. There's no black and whites and magic bullets in energy. It just doesn't work that way.
This has been an amazing conversation so far, and I hate to bring it to an end. We did have a few questions on Q&A from the audience. I love to keep it engaging as it has been. Chris, there was one question actually from a Liberty Energy family member that says, I play a role in helping to create Liberty leaders, but that starts with helping to support great humans. What role do you see the human factor playing in the future of energy?
Oh, the human factor is everything. I always say people don't do business with companies with logos on business cards. People do business with people they like and they trust. Ideas get formed and followed because those people are compelling and they bring people along with them. So not just your technical knowledge, but your human heart is what ultimately moves the world. Which is why I think the politicians, when they say one thing but believe something different, people figure that out. That doesn't drive a movement. That doesn't drive change. But if you can touch people with your heart and your sincerity, you can get the people around you on your team to change. You can really drive change. If your beliefs are sincere, if you're candid, if you admit your flaws and you're driven by something you care about. It's not just your job, you care about it. That's how change happens. That's how success happens.
Thank you so much. I know that we could keep going, but I do want to get us on time. I know we all have things to do. I do want to take 1 second to say thank you to everyone that has been on this call, everyone that has asked questions, everyone that has answered questions, Chris specifically, of course. I just have to say that Energy Dialogue's mission is to create conversations and bring together thought leaders and decision makers to accelerate positive outcomes, in energy. And really, that is not only energy leaders now, but the next generation, which is, like you said, Chris, who we're kind of looking at, not only the faces here, but in the audience. Today we focused on bringing this next generation to the table, and I really cannot imagine doing it with a better group. You guys are also impressive, and I'm really excited to see where you all grow. Chris, thanks again for being here today and being so open. I know we could have done another hour, and maybe we will again, hopefully. Anyone in the audience, if anyone is interested in learning more about Energy Dialogues, our events, or how to get involved, anything at all, please visit our website and definitely reach out. But until then, I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you at another event. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Humble to have been on your
Thanks,
panel.
guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you, Chris. See ya. Bye.